As I said at the very start, we have two objectives today, and lunch sort of marks the transition from one to the other. So far this morning we've been hearing about some really excellent live business examples of what people are doing to build inclusive business models which not only benefit business because they're sound, profitable business models, but also have a direct impact on people's lives and on development. So that nice nexus which I talked about. We've heard about some of the barriers, some of the challenges within the existing framework, the existing MDG framework, which measures the development impact of this work. But now, of course, we recognize that 2015 is all too soon upon us, and we need a new framework. We need something which will continue and build on the success which we've achieved thus far, but which will also formally bring the business contribution to development into the open, to give it some specific maybe targets, some specific goals, or at least to find a way to acknowledge the contribution which is being made by business, as we've been hearing this morning. So to help us with that transition, we have two presentations, two viewpoints, one from the perspective of the UNDP and one from the perspective of business. And first of all, it's my pleasure to invite Magdy Martinez Soliman, the Deputy Assistant Administrator and Deputy Director of the Bureau for Policy Development at the UNDP here in New York. Magdy has a long and distinguished history with the UN and indeed with the Spanish government, which is in the bio in your notes. So I won't take time to read that out, but instead hand the floor to you, Magdy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Graham was very kind not to submit me to the torture of reading you my CV. My expectation is to remain somewhere between interesting you in my remarks and remaining a tolerable background noise to your lunch. But on behalf of UNDP, let me first of all echo Sigrid Kaag's gratitude this morning, gratitude to our partners from the UN Global Compact and to Georg, to Business Fights Poverty, to the ODI and the numerous supporting partners for having co-organized this exciting event on the margins, but very close to the big buzz of the UN General Assembly. We do attach great importance to delivering the next 2 decades global development framework in partnership with business. We realize that we simply cannot do it without you, and furthermore, we shouldn't do it without you. I would like to give you an overview of where we stand with the MDGs. Around the table, we were starting to have a discussion of how the transition between the MDG framework and the future post-2015 framework will happen, how the countries will, hopefully in a seamless manner, transition from having the 8 objectives in mind for their development planning to a perhaps slightly more ambitious agenda with more issues, with the issues that were not there in the first place when in year 2000 we developed the Millennium Development Goals. And certainly try to add a few remarks on how we see the private sector positioning itself in the debate first and in the action to transform it into reality afterwards. Let me take one step back and talk about the 8 Millennium Development Goals. They probably have persuaded everybody that they were a powerful tool in mobilizing the international community around clear, concise, and measurable development objectives to be fulfilled by 2015. We didn't know when we were drafting in 1998 and 1999 the initial milestones of what would become the MDG agenda, how fundamental a platform we were offering for over 140 governments, for over 140 societies that aligned their development policies around comparable objectives, and for about another 50 governments, those who provided their support to these jointly heartfelt goals. The success story is very clear. It is written in terms of poverty reduction. Over 600 million people lifted out of misery, twice the population of this country, the United States of America. The world is within reach of seeing, for the first time in the history of mankind, every child enrolled in primary school, and as importantly, or even more importantly, every girl accessing the same levels of education as the boys do. And many fewer lives are being lost to hunger and disease. The global population as a whole is healthier, wealthier, and better educated than ever before. Yet, the aggregate and average figures, the so-called tyranny of the statistics, disguise the inconvenient truth that ending poverty is certainly an unfinished agenda. 1/5 of the developing world still lives under the $1.25 mark a day. 925 million people were undernourished in 2010, and inequality is increasing in many countries. The multiple crises which have gripped the world in recent years have also exacerbated these challenges. More vulnerability, more people living on the margins. The economy, the cohesion of our society, and the planet's ecosystems are and remain under considerable stress. And that's why staying focused on achieving the MDGs remains our foremost responsibility and task in the next 3 years. It's not a short period, there is still a long mile to go. The ability to agree on a new development framework, to keep momentum and engagement alive, hinges on how much progress we collectively make on the MDGs. Because the degree of their achievement will be the building block for their successor framework. One important lesson learned in the past decade and a half, is that there were challenges not included in the MDGs because of political considerations, because some of the proposals were considered threatening to some, because there wasn't sufficient consensus around these ideas. Some challenges were less well understood, and new challenges have arisen between 1999, 2000, and 2015, when the new development framework will be agreed upon. For example, the appetite for democracy in the Arab region and elsewhere has shown that political inclusion is as important as economic opportunity. They actually go hand in hand. People want good jobs, but they also want a strong voice in their societies. Men and women, especially when they're young, need bread, but also roses to live a life they value. Some basic rights that determine future participation and legal empowerment, especially of the poor, have led scholars and our UNICEF colleagues to request ensuring every citizen has access to a documented legal identity and is registered at birth. Financial inclusion and access to banking services appear as a necessary element of this empowerment drive. So what are we in the UN doing to prepare and to inspire this post-2015 agenda? How can we bring soul into this somewhat hard-nosed development framework that talks about statistics, goals, targets, development policies, and other such tools? Let me mention 3 major initiatives, processes that are of importance. The consultation process, the Member States Open Working Group, and the Secretary General's high-level panel. First, we are preparing, together with all the other UN development agencies, a set of far-reaching, open and multi-stakeholders consultation. I insist on the term. These are consultations that need to be animated and where participation is a must from sectors that include you, of course, business, the private sector, but also others whose voices need to be heard and influence the debate. National consultations beginning in more than 50 countries over the rest of 2012 and half of 2013, with a target of 100 countries by 2014. I just come back from Kinshasa, where I had the opportunity of meeting the CEOs of the major mining and logging companies in the context of the post-2015 national consultation in DRC. And I can assure you that these companies have something else in mind, have a vision that does not go along with illegal exploitations, conflict minerals, child labor, ecosystem damage, widespread corruption, work hazard, and local social tensions. They are starting to turn their corporate social responsibility aspirations into development objectives for the country where they operate, and consider our development goals as reputational investments in their brands and bottom lines. Together with these bottom-up processes to influence the global agenda, 9 global thematic consultations. We were talking a minute ago about the consultation on growth and employment that brought together several stakeholders, especially Japanese, it happened in Tokyo, from the business sector and the labor unions. 9 global thematic consultations that will discuss topics such as governance, energy, health, water, food security, environmental sustainability, and development metrics, among other topics that are essential to modern development. An overall global consultation with civil society and citizens will be organized like the Rio Plus dialogues through a virtual platform, hoping to reach out to somewhere between 20 and 25 million people. These 3 consultative processes are warmly welcoming business leaders in the countries and from the sectors to discuss the options that are starting to take shape. For instance, our colleagues in the health sector say that health in the future, and health is probably the king of the MDGs, cannot be discussed without the private sector in health. Secondly, the establishment of the Open Working Group was agreed by the Rio Plus conference to guide the development of the Sustainable Development Goal. This is an intergovernmental working group anticipated to look more thoroughly into the inclusive green growth equation within the whole development paradigm or development platform. The new framework should certainly be greener, should certainly be more sustainable than the MDGs were. We are committed before, but certainly since Rio, to that objective. And finally, the Secretary General recently announced the establishment of a high-level panel to advise him on the post-2015 development agenda. The panel holds its first meeting today and is expected to submit a critical report to the SG in the first half of 2013, together with heads of state and government and UN officials, personalities like Ms. Betty Maina, the Chief Executive of Kenya's Association of Manufacturers, or Mr. Paul Polman, the CEO of Unilever, will ensure that business views will feature prominently in the report. Our objective at the end of the day is to make the best use of these various processes to help member states arrive at a unified set of concise, clear, and measurable development goals that keep poverty reduction at their core. I want to be very clear on this. This is not turning into a set of sustainable development goals that will forget about social protection, that will forget about the need to maintain health, education, and poverty eradication at the very helm of those objectives. It is about reducing the trade-offs between environmental sustainability, social protection, economic growth, creation of employment, and progress in our societies. We believe that the future framework should remain firmly anchored on human rights and therefore on sustainability. The great force of the MDGs was their simplicity. They could be understood by all, they could be implemented universally, and they established a clear sense of priority. We foresee an equally limited number of economic growth, of concrete and universal goals that would correspond to economic growth, to social protection, to environmental sustainability, hopefully to sensible governance and to peace and security. That might be the tougher part of the agenda's discussion. It is, of course, easier said than done, but perhaps it needs to be said first if we want it to be done later. Let me come to my final point. Where do the non-state actors, such as business, fit into the definition of this agenda? How do your contributions can indeed shape it. I was referring to you my discussions with some of the very hardcore entrepreneurs in a very difficult environment, business environment, but in general, political and social environment, such as Congo, because there is still need for persuasion on sustainability, on inclusion and equity, not only being the right thing to do in ethical terms, but also the smart thing to do in business terms, to develop new markets of consumers, secure resources and supplies, or ensure the political stability and the security conditions that business also need to operate. More and more companies are recognizing this, but we still need to reach the tipping point where this thinking becomes conventional wisdom in the private sector. UNDP stands ready, and so does the UN system as a whole, to reach out and engage you, the business leaders, so that the new Universal Development Horizon becomes a shared project today and a joint venture tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention.